Welcome back to another episode. Today's word of the day is moratorium. So, that may not be a word you've heard really ever, but it's something that's actually been used more commonly within the past year or so. And what it essentially means is it is think of it like a curfew. So, I'm not sure if you remember a few months back during the previous administration when they had the riots in D.C. And during that time, I remember I had a hockey game I was supposed to head to, and the game was canceled because they issued a curfew in Arlington. So if you know how a curfew works, it's essentially you have to stay home, stay off the streets for a period of time so that the police and the authorities can actually keep everything in order. So a moratorium is not very different from that. Essentially what it is it is a waiting period set by an authority. So you can kind of think of it like a curfew. Now, the way a moratorium's actually been used is think of it more with, let's say, the financial obligations that you may actually have. So you're most likely aware when the pandemic hit in 2020, there were a lot of businesses that had to close their doors. Some ended up even closing permanently, and as a result, a number of people lost their jobs. Now, within the United States, there are approximately 43 million renters, which is a pretty big number, right? Didn't realize it was actually that many. And for that, considering everyone that did lose their jobs, renters especially are at risk of not being able to pay their rent. So what the CDC decided to petition Congress to actually pass was the eviction moratorium. So an eviction may not have been a word that you're familiar with before, but an eviction essentially means where a lease for a tenant is broken in some capacity, whether it's a financial obligation or something along the lines of violating the lease. That's actually happened. So in the case of the pandemic, a lot of tenants were not able to actually pay their rents. So the big concern by the CDC was, okay, well, if these tenants actually go out and about, are they going to have a place to live? Is this going to increase the risk of the pandemic actually getting worse? So they actually petitioned Congress to pass an eviction moratorium, which essentially made it illegal, at least for a period of time, for the eviction moratorium to evict a tenant. Now, they did this for as a federal mandate across all 50 states, and this occurred in September of 2020, and it was supposed to go through to the end of the year. Now, with everything that's going on now and the new administration being in place, that moratorium was supposed to be extended until the end of March 2021. And it just so happens that there has been definitely an uproar based on the moratorium. Again, based on sort of all the ideas and kind of how it works, you can already see the benefit of the CDC wanting to make sure that the pandemic did not get worse. However, you have to consider two sides to every equation. And the one side, it was protecting tenants, making sure they actually had a place to stay. But on the other side, you had landlords. And if landlords were not able to collect on the rent, what were they actually going to do to make sure they held onto their properties? So there were a number of different stimulus packages that were put about. I believe the EIDL loan and the PPP loan were a few resources that were put out there so that landlords could have coverage if they did not have the funds to actually be able to pay their mortgages. And this actually was assistance that was provided to tenants as well. So there had to be concessions that were made on both sides, and that's why it's so important to understand what actually gets passed through as far as our laws and legislation, because it has to be something that's balanced. It can't just favor one side over the other, or else the entire system would collapse. So with that, what's been very interesting that I didn't even recognize in regards to the moratorium is that the fines are very, very hefty and very, very high. So if a landlord violates this eviction moratorium, the fines could be $100,000. A fine of $100,000. And if someone were to die as a result of an eviction happening, $250,000. Right? And that's nothing to kind of shy at. And those are pretty stiff penalties, especially even in addition to that, you could have a year in jail. Right? So the penalties, the federal government makes those penalties so severe because it does not want anyone to violate them.